Your silence after they rejected you has become the most devastating psychological weapon they never saw coming. While they expected tears, begging, or angry confrontations, your complete disappearance has shattered their entire understanding of how relationships work and how people respond to their emotional unavailability. They thought rejection would give them power and control, but your silence has stripped away every defense mechanism they relied on and left them psychologically naked and terrified. The validation supply cutoff crisis. Your silence has severed their primary source of emotional validation and ego feeding in the most brutal way possible. They were so accustomed to your attention, your pursuit, and your emotional reactions that losing it all at once has created a psychological withdrawal that feels like actual physical pain. The constant stream of validation you provided has been replaced by deafening silence that echoes in every corner of their consciousness. They never realized how much of their self-worth was dependent on your emotional investment until that investment was completely withdrawn. The person who used to light up when they entered the room, who always responded to their texts, who made them feel important and desired, has vanished entirely. This sudden absence of validation has left them questioning their own value and desirability in ways they've never had to before. The silence forces them to confront how empty they feel without your attention. They discover that much of their confidence and sense of self-importance was actually borrowed from your perception of them. Without your eyes reflecting their worth back to them, they feel invisible and insignificant in ways that terrify them to their core. The control loss, psychological breakdown. Your silence has completely dismantled their carefully constructed sense of control over the relationship dynamic. They were used to being the one who determined when contact happened, who controlled the emotional temperature, and who decided the terms of engagement. Your complete withdrawal has flipped the power dynamic so dramatically that they're experiencing psychological whiplash. The control they thought they had was always dependent on your participation in their emotional games. When you stopped playing entirely, they discovered they had no real power at all, just the illusion of control that required your cooperation to maintain. Now they're the one waiting for contact, wondering what you're thinking, and feeling powerless to affect your emotional state. This loss of control is particularly devastating because their entire identity has been built around being the person who doesn't need anyone while others need them. Your silence has revealed that they actually needed you far more than you needed them, which contradicts everything they believed about themselves and their emotional independence. The ego destruction process. Your silence after rejection has inflicted massive damage to their ego, because it suggests that you don't consider them worth fighting for or pursuing after their rejection. Instead of increasing your desire to win them over, their rejection made you lose interest entirely. This response implies that they weren't as special or irresistible as they believed themselves to be. The silence communicates that you've evaluated them and found them lacking, which is the opposite of how rejection is supposed to work in their psychological framework. They expected their rejection to make them more valuable and desirable, not to reveal that you consider them easily replaceable or not worth the effort of pursuit. This ego damage is compounded by the realization that someone they genuinely cared about could walk away so completely after their rejection. If they weren't important enough to fight for, what does that say about their actual value as a person? The silence forces them to confront their own dispensability in ways their ego isn't equipped to handle. The replacement reality shock. Your silence has made them realize that finding someone who understood them as deeply as you did isn't as easy as they assumed it would be. Everyone else they encounter feels shallow and unsatisfying compared to the connection they had with you. Your unique understanding of their psychology and your patience with their patterns now feels irreplaceable rather than easily duplicated. They're discovering that your specific brand of love and acceptance was rare and valuable in ways they never appreciated when they had it. Other people don't love them through their difficult moments, don't understand their need for space, and don't provide the specific type of emotional regulation that you offered naturally. The silence has forced them to confront the possibility that they rejected their best chance at genuine love and connection. This realization is devastating because it means they destroyed something precious through their own fear and emotional immaturity, and they can't undo the damage they've caused. The obsessive mental loop torture. Your silence has trapped them in obsessive mental loops where they constantly replay the rejection and try to understand why you disappeared so completely instead of fighting for them. They analyze every word they said, every expression on your face, and every moment of the rejection, looking for clues about what went wrong. The loops are torture because they can clearly see all the ways they could have handled things differently, all the signs that you were genuinely done with their behavior, and all the opportunities they had to choose love over fear. The clarity that comes with hindsight makes the loss feel even more devastating because it was so preventable. They're stuck cycling between regret about their choice to reject you, confusion about your complete disappearance, and desperate strategizing about how to undo the damage they've caused. The mental obsession is consuming their ability to focus on anything else in their lives. The loneliness amplification effect. Your silence has amplified their natural tendency toward loneliness into something that feels unbearable. They're used to dealing with isolation, but the silence feels different because it represents the loss of someone who genuinely understood and accepted them despite their flaws. This isn't just regular loneliness, it's the specific pain of losing their person. The silence makes every day feel empty in ways they never experienced before because they lost more than just a relationship. They lost their safe harbor, their emotional regulation source, and their most understanding supporter. The loneliness is compounded by the knowledge that they created this isolation through their own choices. They're discovering that there's a difference between choosing to be alone and being left alone by someone they needed more than they realized. Your silence has taught them that solitude feels completely different when it's the result of losing someone irreplaceable rather than choosing independence. The growth-forcing confrontation. Your silence has forced them into the most uncomfortable period of self-examination in their entire lives because they no longer have you to focus on, blame, or use as a distraction from their own issues. Without your presence to react to or your emotions to manage, they have to turn inward and examine their own patterns and choices. This forced introspection is revealing patterns they've been avoiding for years, how they push away everyone who gets close, how they use rejection as a tool to maintain control, and how their fear of vulnerability destroys their most meaningful connections. The silence has removed all their usual distractions and defense mechanisms. They're being confronted with the possibility that they're the problem in their relationships, that their avoidant patterns are destructive rather than protective, and that they need fundamental changes to avoid repeating this devastating loss with future partners. The permanent damage recognition. Your silence has made them realize that some damage can't be undone, and some relationships can't be repaired once certain lines are crossed. They're confronting the reality that their rejection might have been the final straw that destroyed your willingness to tolerate their emotional unavailability. The silence suggests that you've reached a point of no return, where their usual tactics of intermittent attention and minimal effort won't be enough to repair the damage they've caused. This recognition of permanent consequences is terrifying for someone who's always believed they could manipulate their way back into people's good graces. Your silence after their rejection has become their worst nightmare, the complete loss of someone who genuinely mattered to them, with no clear path back to redemption. They're learning that some mistakes cost everything, and some people won't give infinite chances to be hurt again.